Oh, it must have been another country. Yes, it must have been another land. That couldn't happen in the USA. We'd never treat a man that way.
Saturday, June 27, day 27. Well, this month is nearly over, and honestly, most of the information that I have recently revealed would have never become public if it wasn't for Moshe Meischlis and the Israeli Mossad. I have been under a doctor's care for the wounds that have been inflicted by Mr. Meischlis and his deadly electromagnetic frequency radiation death ray device. Luckily, I was able to figure it out. Most individuals aren't as fortunate, and it is for this reason that I decided to go public and expose the Israeli Mossad and their henchmen. In today's program, I will share two videos that will provide the timeline and evidence to connect the dots to show the link between the Central Intelligence Agency and the Israeli Mossad. The first video today will show George Herbert Walker Bush standing in front of the Texas Depository moments before and after Kennedy was killed. And the second video I will show you today is of John Lear, former CIA pilot and insider who goes public about the Israeli Mossad and the CIA connection. And today's program wouldn't be complete without Moshe Meischlis popping up in the video today. God willing, I'll be back tomorrow.
By now, everyone has seen this picture of George Bush and Richard Nixon planning the defense on the Watergate. And probably many people have seen this picture of George Bush standing in front of the Texas School Book Depository, being questioned by police as to what he saw when President Kennedy was assassinated. You'll notice there are various FBI agents, C.I.A. agents, and police officers standing around talking to Bush. Next to Bush, I have laid this picture of Bush and Nixon in the White House. This is a forensic technique that investigators use in order to verify the identity of an unknown person in a picture. You match the skull shape, the hairline, the chin, the nose in the two photos, as was done in the famous book Coup d'etat in America by Michael Canfield and A.J. Weberman. This series of photos in the book proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the actual assassins of John Kennedy were E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis. In the same vein, we're attempting to prove that this is a picture of George Bush standing in front of the Texas School Book Depository before, during, and after the assassination of President Kennedy. You will notice this person is wearing the same type of tie, white shirt, suit, has his hands in his pockets, just like George Bush in the White House picture, is the same height, is the same weight, wearing the same pants, the same style of pants, same shoes in both pictures. This is very strong evidence to suggest that this is a picture of George Bush in front of the Texas School Book Depository during the assassination of President Kennedy. Now, why was Kennedy assassinated? Because Kennedy had just stopped the invasion of Cuba and arrested all the CIA agents who were training for the next invasion of Cuba in New Orleans at Lake Pontchartrain. The Cuban government has issued a book listing all the people, the 150 people from the Bay of Pigs that they suspect were involved in the assassination of President Kennedy. Almost all of those people were photographed in Dallas, Texas during the assassination of President Kennedy. The other reasons why Kennedy was assassinated was because he issued U.S. notes and called for the abolition of the Federal Reserve and he printed these U.S. notes to stop the British bankers and the private banks from destroying the U.S. economy. So George Bush, whose father, Prescott Bush, was on the U.S. Senate Banking Committee, was very interested in maintaining the Federal Reserve and ripping off the United States. President Kennedy wanted to abolish the Federal Reserve and put the U.S. back on the silver standard and the gold standard and producing things of value. So this, we believe, is George Bush. Now, George Bush was asked where he was the day Kennedy was assassinated, and he said, "I cannot remember where I was." But funny thing is, he called the FBI and reported a guy named Parrott as being one of the people who had assassinated President Kennedy. Just before this picture of him was taken, proving that he was in Dallas, Texas, and was trying to manipulate the investigation of the assassination of
I want to
President
ask you a
Kennedy.
question. Did you know Ben Rich?
No, but I talked to people who did. Now, I'll tell you what Ben Rich had to do with this. First of all, do you know where he was born? Ben Rich was one of the most the biggest Mossad spy in the United States. I mean, he got the most classified information. Here's what happened. Here's how we got messed up with Israel. In 1947, when Israel became a state, Jim, I keep saying Anslinger. It's not Anslinger. James Angleton was chief of C.I.A. in Rome. Okay. They sent Angleton down to Tel Aviv along with some guys at MI6 to form Mossad. And for some reason, however it happened, James Angleton got allied with Mossad like this forever. He was the mole. If you remember, in 1960, he was the head CIA director of foreign intelligence, and he was the guy that always was looking for the Russian mole. He was the Russian mole because, you know, he was so friends with Mossad, he'd tell Mossad stuff and Mossad would pass it on to Russia. So when David Ben-Gurion in the summer of 1963 said, you know, we have to kill Kennedy. We have to. I'm tired of you threatening us with inspecting Dimona. It's none of his friggin' business. I don't want to hear any more from Kennedy. You kill him. He gave that order to Mossad, and then resigned, so that he couldn't be held responsible for it. Mossad then went to Angleton. The Kennedy assassination was not a CIA job, but it was greased by the CIA only because Angleton was in there with his buddies at Mossad. And he's the one that greased the skids for everything that happened in Dealey Plaza and the escape and everything. They were Corsican sharpshooters there, hired by Mossad. They pulled off the whole thing, and everybody says, well, you know, they think the mob killed Kennedy, or maybe Johnson did, or Castro. It wasn't. It was Israel, and the reason they did is because David Ben-Gurion didn't want any more inspections of Dimona, and that's all.
And that's their nuclear. It's where they do their nuclear.
That's where they got their
biological
nuclear bombs with plutonium they stole from us, and other.
But
things.
what's Ben Rich got to do with that?
Okay, so Ben Rich was born with a very wealthy Jewish family in the Philippines, and very highly educated, and he was slipped into Lockheed in 1953 as Kelly Johnson's second in charge. And he was there for the development of the U-2, and he was there for the development of stealth.
You know, there are a lot of Ben Rich famous kind of UFO quotes that kind of allude to things that technology, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing of that in that book. That book's the inside story, the development of the U-2.
I understand.
And the SI-71.
But he did say, he said, what's the exact quote? You probably remember it.
We have stuff that would make
Star
George
Wars
Lucas jealous.
That would make...
We could take E.T. home.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, he was an insider from way back, is what you're telling me, right?
Yeah, but he was a Mossad spy, and I'm going to tell you how they did it. Okay, now,
But on some level, if he's a Mossad spy, because the Mossad seems to be in cahoots with, if you want to call them, you know, the Nazi, NASA Nazi group.
I'm glad you understand that, because when people say, did Israel have anything to do with 9/11, I said, as much as Santa Claus had to do with Christmas. So anyway.
So yeah, they're all working together. If you're telling me Angleton was involved with Mossad, you're telling me Ben Rich is involved with Mossad. You know, we've got the whole, there's a whole alignment there.
Absolutely, positively, beyond a shadow of a doubt. So now we get ready to build the stealth fighter, and this was the beginning of the real secret stuff that went on within our government.
Oh, it must have been another country. Yes, it must have been another land. That couldn't happen in the USA. We'd never treat a man that way.